My name is Kennedy and welcome to my channel. This video is going to be about my favorite series ever, Game of Thrones. I have watched Game of Thrones 6 times all the way through, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, House of Dragons. I've read Fire and Blood up there, which is the Targaryen history textbook, or basically the book that House of Dragons is made of. So I have read or watched everything Game of Thrones, but until recently, I have not read it. Today we will be discussing the first 2 books, A Game of Thrones and A Clash of Kings. And then I'm going to keep making these discussion videos, deep dives, as I read through the series. I'm very excited to make these videos because Game of Thrones is basically my Roman Empire. There's not a day that goes by that I do not think something about Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. I will literally be up at 1 a.m. and just thinking about old Valyria or something random. So I'm really excited to get into these discussions, and the books obviously give us a lot more info and insights into these characters. So I want to see theories and see what everybody else thinks too, as of course, The Winds of Winter has not been released. This video is going to be discussion and deep dives, so of course, if you haven't seen or read Game of Thrones, I don't know what you're doing, you're missing out, and if you have watched it, then come discuss. Starting off, I will say that specifically season 1 in the show follows book 1 almost to a T. I was very surprised how well they adapted it, and honestly, as I'm a couple more books ahead now, this show adapts it pretty well, in my opinion. I think the characters are done well. Some characters I even like a little more in the show. And so far, a lot of the main points are there, but I will be getting into the differences. The main differences are the characters' ages, of course, specifically Daenerys, Jon, Robb, and Joffrey. All of them are much younger in the book. Jon and Robb are like 15, Joffrey is 13, Arya is 9. That does make some of the things they go through in the book a little harder when you picture them with their younger ages. I also want to know, if you watch the show first before reading the book, are you just picturing the characters from the show like I am? Because it's very hard not to, but I love the show characters for the most part. But again, that makes it difficult because the show is so much older. I can't picture this Jon Snow in the show as this little 16-year-old Jon Snow. I don't know. Another main difference between the series and the shows is there is a lot more magic at play in the books, which I enjoy. In the books, we see Jon also warg into his direwolf ghost. We see Arya having wolf dreams with Nymeria and hunting with her pack. Obviously, sadly, we didn't get to see much of Lady because she was killed. And we never see a Robb POV, so we do not know if he can warg into his wolf. But considering that 3 of the Stark children with direwolves can warg into their wolves, I am assuming that all of the Stark children can. They also talk a lot more about the comet in the books, and each character kind of thinks the comet is a sign from them, from God. It just seems like the show cut a lot of all of this out, and I do understand why, though. But it is really cool to see Jon warging into Ghost and how that might play into the future. A couple other differences I noticed was the introduction of Reek. Reek was Ramsay's plaything before Theon, and when Reek came to Winterfell after Theon took it over, I was very confused by that, but I thought it was actually pretty cool how they did it and turned it into Ramsay. Also, with Arya at Harrenhal, she never actually spoke to Tywin or was really ever in the same room with him. She would just see him in passing. I kind of like how the show added that, how she would serve Tywin and they would speak a little bit. It added a lot of tension, and I thought that was really cool. And this is the same as in the show, but obviously with Jaqen Hagar, I just wish she would have said Tywin, Cersei, Joffrey, and a lot of things would have went smoother if that was the case. But she is just a child, so I do understand, and seeing Jaqen again was very cool. One of the last main differences was Barristan the Bold and how he hid his identity a lot longer from Daenerys than in the show. It didn't change many things, but I did think it was interesting. They did cut out Belwas, I think his name was, that Barristan was serving as his squire. But again, most of these books have been the same. Of course, as I always like to, I would have liked to have read the books before the show, but watching the show first, and so many times especially, has given me a really cool perspective when I read the books. There's a lot of lore drops and stories, like Old Nan's stories about Duncan the Tall. There's also so much Targaryen lore in here. It is insane. And the fact that I know a lot of the characters they're talking about now and can really understand what is going on in this Targaryen lore, it's really cool to hear about it. So many stories and songs that go with all of the different houses and books in Game of Thrones, and just such a deep history. This world, I would watch anything in this world. If it was a peasant in King's Landing, if we see Edric Storm sailing and going on his journey, I would love to see anything about Old Valyria. I think about Old Valyria all the time. George R. R. Martin just made this world so good and so realistic feeling. I truly feel like it's real a lot of the times. And again, they can make a season about anyone in any part of the show. Dorne or Old Town, the Maesters would be awesome, and I would just eat it up. So yeah, I'm just loving it. I'm loving the journey through the books. Now I'm going to talk about the characters in the books, and I kind of want to see if my opinion changes, who are my favorite characters as I continue reading. My favorite show character was Jaime, and I don't think that's going to change, but yes, Jaime is my favorite character. In the books, weirdly, I prefer Renly more in the book than in the show, and I prefer Stannis more in the show than the book. I feel like we just barely seen Renly in the show, and Stannis in the book is a lot less confident and strong than I thought he would be. Catelyn Stark is by far my least favorite in the show, but I do not mind her as much in the books, particularly book 2. She gets a little better. Just the decisions she made, I feel, really tore down her family and really caused a lot of the bad things that happen in this book. Her riding to King's Landing to tell Ned, her capturing Tyrion, her letting Jaime go, and a lot of times in the book too, she's just always thinking that she is right and she knows battle more than these men who have battled before. She is very wise, and a lot of times she does give good advice, but sometimes she is just wrong, and again, a lot of her decisions, I just think, derailed this so much when she did not need to do all of that. But seeing inside of her head more, of course, we just see her being worried about her children, being a loving and caring mother, and just trying to do the best she can. So in that way, I do understand it, and I understand a lot of the things she did. She's just not one of my favorites. One character in the book that I am surprised to be disliking is Jorah. In the show, Jorah is very charming and just protective over Khaleesi. We do know that he loves her, but in the book, he's actually really creepy and weird about it. He's not charming at all, and he's always trying to boss her around and talk down on anybody else that tries to get close to her. Jorah was just always going against anything Barristan said and trying to talk down on him when Barristan was way better of a man than Jorah ever was. And yeah, kind of surprised by that because I basically hate Jorah in the books. He is gross and very annoying. Tyrion, of course, is great in the books and show. He is one of the best characters ever written, in my opinion, just very dynamic, and his chapters are always my favorite. They're always so good, not a boring line. Joffrey's horrible in both, not much changing there, and Theon is another character that I dislike, of course, but it was kind of funny seeing inside of his head and just how pathetic he is, really. He basically doesn't feel like a Stark or a Greyjoy, and his dad does not care about him at all. But it is just funny how cocky he is and pathetic, really, and he's just whining the whole time. It's on his POV. I was surprised by some POVs that we do not see in this book, like Rob's. We never get a Rob POV. That is very interesting to me, as I've seen him as a main character. However, we see him through Catelyn, which I do think is interesting. I definitely would have liked to see him warging into Greywind, though, fighting his battles. We only heard about the battles, and I would have liked to witness some. But I do like how George portrays these main characters kind of through side characters like Catelyn and Rob, or Davos with Stannis. And I love Davos. I love Davos in the show. He's never one of my favorites, but I always enjoyed him. But reading his chapters, he just warms my heart. He's so humble and brave and smart, and he is not afraid to talk down at Stannis. So Davos chapters have been some of my favorites. The next topic we are going to discuss honestly blew my mind when I read it. I read over this chapter so many times, and that is Daenerys in the House of the Undying. It briefly went through this in the show, but definitely not to this extent, because there are a ton of spoilers if you know the ending of Game of Thrones. This is one of the things that I thought was really cool, having already watched the show and now reading back when this book was written so long before the show and seeing how the events turned out. So one of the first things Daenerys sees is the Red Wedding. She sees a bunch of people dead at a feast and a king with a wolf head sitting on a throne. That just blew my mind right there. She literally seen the Red Wedding. And that also gives a lot of credit to all the other things she sees, because we know the Red Wedding is real and that Rob's wolf's head gets sewn onto him, which is one of the saddest things in the series. She also sees her brother Rhaegar Targaryen with Elia and their first child, Aegon. Rhaegar is telling her about the Song of Ice and Fire, where Aegon has to be sitting on the throne and is going to save the realm from evil, which obviously ties into so many things in the Game of Thrones world that it is just really cool to see so early on in the books. There's a lot more about Rhaegar Targaryen in the books, and I really like hearing about him and seeing all these theories on him. He seemed to be really obsessed with that prophecy, the Song of Ice and Fire, and he felt it was his duty to create that, which is why I believe after he had a child with Lyanna, they also named him Aegon, which is, of course, Jon Snow. But he wanted his child, or thought he would be, the prophecy. More of the prophecy told to Daenerys comes to her in versions of 3. There is 3 fires you must light. 1 for life, 1 for death, and 1 for love. 1 for life is presumed to have been the dragons being born, obviously. 1 for death, one can assume would be her burning King's Landing or some other major city. And 1 for love, I have no clue what that would be, as that was not shown in the show. Maybe that would be Drogon burning her after she dies. I'm not completely sure, but we haven't seen that one come through. But this does lead to a discussion of if season 8, widely hated Game of Thrones season, is actually pretty accurate, because this makes it seem so. A lot of people were mad, saying that Daenerys would never go mad, she would never do these things. But as I'm reading the books, she even sees it in herself, that there is a dragon and there is a madness in her. And she always thinks, well, what if I did turn mad? And she can kind of see it. So I don't see it as a surprise that she does that in season 8, and especially this prophecy in the House of the Undying makes it seem like that is the reality the book is going to have as well. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with that, or you have another theory on to what a fire for death would mean. Next is 3 mounts you must ride. 1 to bed, 1 to dread, and 1 to love. Of course, this can have different meanings, as in a literal mount like a horse or Drogon, her dragon, or it could mean sexual partners or people that she loves. I take it in terms to mean sexual partners or boyfriends / husbands of hers. 1 to bed would be Drogon. one to dread would probably be Euron Greyjoy or Dario Naharis. I'm not sure about that one. And one to love, I'm assuming, would be Jon Snow. Again, let me know your opinions, but it is so cool to read this. And again, these are things that just keep me up all night thinking. The last one is 3 treasons you must face. 1 for blood, 1 for gold, and 1 for love. There's also a theme in the last one of the 3s always being for love, and seems to always tie to Jon Snow. So for the 3 treasons, even Daenerys in the book thinks that the 1 for blood was Maryse Mazdur, the magic lady who said that she would save Drogo, but really killed him and her son. So it seems like that is the first treason. The second for gold, I am not completely sure, but it could be Jorah and how he was basically spying on her and sending updates to Varys, and she finds out about that. So I'm assuming that's that. And the third one for love, I mean, if we're going based on the show, it's obviously when Jon Snow kills her. So again, let me know your theories, but it's all kind of lining up in my head with season 8 in the show, which people hate. But it all makes sense with this prophecy from book 2, which is just crazy to me. Another thing Daenerys sees is someone dead tied to a ship. It says with gray eyes smiling sadly, and I can't take credit for this, but I seen someone on Reddit say it, and gray eyes smiling sadly seems to mean Greyjoy. Obviously, it's also a ship, and the Greyjoys are the Krakens, so a lot of people think this is Euron Greyjoy. I haven't seen a lot of Euron in the books yet, so I'm not sure how that will tie in. But either way, I think that is beautiful writing and a really good catch by the people that caught that, because gray eyes smiling sadly definitely means Greyjoy. And apparently it means he's going to die and be on the prow of a ship. The last couple of things she sees are her son as if he were still alive. He was an adult with tan like Drogo and white hair like the Targaryens. And then she sees her brother Rhaegar dying, and it says he says a woman's name, which we can only assume is Lyanna. So both Daenerys and us get a lot of lore here, and I was really digging into this, and I was so shocked when I read this in the book, because again, it doesn't go through any of this in the show. I can kind of see why now. It's literally spoilers, but it makes so much sense with the last seasons of Game of Thrones. And it's so cool how George just wrote that so long ago in book 2. And that leads me to the last question I want to ask of you guys. Do you think that season 8 is how George plans to end the series, or did, if he never finishes the series? I watched an interview of George R. R. Martin where he basically said that he gave the creators of the show bullet points as to what would happen, but obviously could not fill them in on everything that happens along the way. And I know for future books there are characters and things that are cut out. I still don't know who young Griff is, and I know that Lady Catelyn does come back. That is basically the one spoiler I had besides what I watched of the show, but I did know that Catelyn comes back, and obviously the show cut that out. But do you think that Daenerys goes mad and kills all of King's Landing? And do you think that Jon kills her for it and Bran takes the throne? I have heard that George has stated that it is his plan for Bran to take the throne. I'm not sure, but this book specifically, again, the House of the Undying scenes, really made me rethink my opinions on season 8, because it just makes so much sense with the book. I do think the show rushed it, however, and obviously they're not going to do as good of a job as George as advancing these characters' paths and making them dynamic and getting them to these conclusions in a way that George hopefully will if we ever get the book. But it does seem to me that the main points really do happen. I know George also says that some characters died that he was not planning on killing, and some lived that he was planning on killing. So I really hope we get the book. Either way, I am satisfied with just reading and getting every ounce I can out of this book, these shows. I'm going to be so sad when I finish the books. Thank you guys for watching, and please let me know any theories you have down below, and I will be going through and discussing the rest of the books in this series as well. There are some more deeper lore and theories that happen later. Again, we get to see Catelyn, so there's a lot more to discuss. We can get a lot deeper with the next books in the series, but let me know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the House of the Undying prophecies? What are your thoughts on the book characters versus show characters? And what are your thoughts on how season 8 ended? And how you think the last book in the series, if ever written, will end or will be different. I also want to know your favorite characters just because I'm curious. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.